concept that we keep talking about through all of English 1, through all of English 2. We're going to touch on it in computers and billing class when you get to your writing project. And we're going to touch on it in communications too. And it's this concept called audience. This is one of the most important things in writing to keep in mind. If you don't keep your audience in mind, then they could end up not really absorbing the information that you're trying to get across. So, who's the audience? I hope that this is the easiest question I ask you. Audience are the people who are reading the paper. What you have to do is adjust your writing based on your audience. And there are a lot of different things about an audience that can influence how you write. For us, when you don't know who your audience is, the best thing to do is keep in mind you're targeting a general audience. So if your audience is unknown, you're going to target a general audience. So what the heck do I mean by that? If you were going to write an article for Maxim magazine or for Sports Illustrated, who do you think your potential audience would be? What gender? Maybe men predominantly? About what age do you think reads Maxim and Sports Illustrated? Maybe somewhere between 15 and 60, something like that. If you're going to write for Cosmopolitan magazine, you're now targeting a completely different demographic. Now you're talking probably to women, probably between the ages of 18 and 30 maybe. So you're going to write about different things and you're going to write things differently. So you're going to talk about the same exact topic 2 different ways because you're targeting 2 different audiences. So what we need to keep in mind for our writing classes and for when you're working clinically is that you have no idea necessarily who might read whatever you're writing. So maybe I'm going to read it. And I can give it to the president of the school, and she'll read it. Or I could give it to my sister, though I don't have one, and she'll read it. So you don't know who's going to read this stuff. When you're writing patient information clinically, you're going to have the patient reading it, and you're going to have patients that run the gamut of ages and genders and backgrounds and things like that. And then they're going to go home and show family members to help them understand whatever is going on. So you don't know who's going to see your stuff. So that's why you want to keep your writing general. And there are ways to do that. One of the biggest things is by not using slang or colloquialisms. If you have already watched the video on slang, jargon, and colloquialisms, you know what I'm talking about. If you haven't, watch that next, and it'll explain what those terms are. And you have to explain your jargon. But like I mentioned, there are a lot of contributing factors to targeting a general audience. So let's go over some of those. I just named a couple of them when I mentioned the difference between Maxim and Sports Illustrated and Cosmo. So do you remember what I said? I mentioned 2 factors. Hopefully you're saying gender, and hopefully you're saying age. those play a big role in how you're going to write things. When you watch the video on how to write a process essay, I kind of talk about this. And the example that I use is girls in the room, or if you're at home and you're a girl. Imagine if your arms were broken and you bring your makeup case to your brother, your boyfriend, your spouse, your father, some man. And you set it in front of him and your arms are broken and you need him to put on your makeup. And you ask him to put on your liquid eyeliner, foundation, cover-up, concealer, eyeshadow, and mascara. And you have, of course, a sea of stuff in that makeup bag, like we all do. Is that guy going to be able to follow your instructions as well as another girl would? Probably not. If you're a girl writing a paper about pregnancy, you need to explain terms like, I almost said semester, trimesters, and you need to explain the body parts involved with pregnancy because a man reading it might not necessarily understand it. And it's the same way on the flip side of things. If a girl is not really up on sports jargon and things like that, if they're reading a Sports Illustrated article about baseball and it's talking about who was on deck and ribbies and all that kind of stuff, you're not going to be able to follow it. If you're reading a football article and they're talking about yardage and pass completion and special teams and things like that, you're not going to be able to follow it if those terms aren't explained and if you're not familiar with the sport. So gender plays a big role in things. Age also plays a huge role in how you're going to style your writing. So, do you think I would teach this stuff the same way if you guys were all in 4th grade? No. I would use different examples. I would use different words. I would use different techniques, more pictures, or more cartoons, or something like that for younger people. Do you think I would teach this the same way if this was a 400 level English class? Nope. I would go quicker. I would not explain the basics as much. I would skip over information I would assume you already knew. So age is going to play a role in things also, because usually the younger somebody is, they have less, and the older somebody is, they have more. The missing words is our next element. Hopefully that made sense to you, and you said education. Education levels are really going to change your style of writing also. Because you guys don't know the gender that's going to be reading, because you don't know the age that's going to be reading your stuff, because you don't know the education level that's going to be reading your stuff. So is a 5th grader reading it? Is a high school graduate reading it? Is a master's graduate reading it? Is a 75-year-old stopped school at 6th grade but has a lot of life experience person reading it, like my grandmother was? So these things play a big role. People with a higher education are going to know bigger vocabulary words. People with a lower education typically don't know bigger vocabulary words because it hasn't been exposed to them in those textbooks or curriculum or vocabulary tests and things like that. Another aspect that changes things is religion. And political views or standpoints or affiliations or whatever you want to say. People from different religions obviously believe different things. Same goes for different political parties. Believe in pro-life versus pro-choice, or believe in this bill over that bill, and things like that. So a lot of the times you're going to see bias in writing. Bias, and I'm saying this word if you're not quite sure what I'm saying. Bias. Bias is when you are stuck to one side or the other, I guess. So if my mother, all of your mothers, when, or your grandmother or somebody who raised you or something like that, when your mother tells you how wonderful you are and how pretty you are, or how handsome you are, or how smart you are, typically they're biased because you're their kid and they love you. And not everybody else is going to have the same opinion. They're prejudiced, might be another word that might help explain that. So there are a lot of times where, let's say you're writing about a controversial political topic, immigration maybe. Should there be a wall between U.S. and Mexico? And you don't have to answer that. I'm not asking what your political ties are. But some of you are going to feel really, really, really strongly about it one way, and some of you are going to feel really, really strongly about it the other way. If that shows in your writing, then your own personal political or religious views could show in your writing, and you don't know who's going to read your paper. So hypothetically, if your political views, let's say you don't want a wall built, and I read your paper and I have a different political view, I'm not going to agree with your paper necessarily. So it's better for most writing styles to target a general audience. And I'm going to violate what I just said a little bit when we get to the persuasive essay at the end of the class. What other factors do you think can change this? Sexual affiliations can change how someone reads a paper. Sometimes, for some. Their occupations, and that kind of goes along with education. So if you guys were writing something for Dimensions, which I believe is like a dental hygiene magazine, if you were going to be writing to other people in the same occupation as you, would you have to define caries and Cavitron and ultrasonic and tray liner and probing and scaling? No, because other people in the field are going to know exactly what you're talking about. But if you have no idea who's going to be reading your paper, you need to explain all of those terms in case somebody else outside of that occupation is going to read that article. So these are the different factors that can influence your audience. So when you're talking to a general audience, the main things that you want to do is avoid slang and colloquialisms, but you really, really, really want to explain jargon or get rid of it altogether. So if you've already watched the video about this, I explain why. If you haven't, make sure you watch that. But sometimes you don't need to use jargon at all. There are English terms for a lot of the stuff I put on the board already, and I haven't used them because I don't need to. It doesn't matter to me if you remember the term necessarily. It matters to me if you remember the concept. So since I'm more concerned about the concept, I don't need to tell you the term. What does it matter if you know it or if you don't? Some people feel like they need to throw a lot of different big words or terms at people to make it seem like they're smart and they know what they're talking about, and you don't need to do that. Sometimes, wait, I'm not going to finish that sentence because it's leading me into the next thing. So if you haven't written all this down yet, please hit pause because I'm about to erase. But when you don't keep audience in mind, there are a couple things that can happen. So sometimes, accidentally, sometimes on purpose, sometimes because you don't know any better, you can end up making yourself as the writer look pretty stupid, or you can make the audience feel stupid. and neither of you are stupid, so you really don't want to get that point across. So that's what we're going to talk about, are ways to make yourself look stupid. And my marker just died a little bit, sorry. Hopefully this one works. So you can, like I said, you can end up making yourself look dumb to your audience when you're writing, or you can make your audience feel dumb. If you're reading something that you didn't write, that somebody else did, and you don't get it and you can't follow it and it makes you feel this big, what do you typically end up doing? Usually stop reading it, you put it down, you get rid of it. You don't want to suffer through the rest of it. So your goal as a writer is to ease the reader in from the very beginning and get them through all the way to the end smoothly, easily, not necessarily quickly, but without any hiccups or without any problems. So, some ways that you make yourself look bad is when you use big words you don't know. So that's why I just stopped that sentence before I erased the board, because that's where I was going. I had a student once in a paper. He kept using the word ramifications, which is a really good word. But the word ramifications means consequences, and he apparently didn't know what the word meant because he kept using it wrong. He kept using it as the opposite, so like a payout or a benefit or something like that. That's how he kept using the word. And the reason was because in Microsoft Word, of course, he right-clicked on the word and there's the synonyms. So he looked at his list of synonyms, not realizing that at the bottom of the list of synonyms, they give you antonyms, which is opposite words. And he saw this nice long word, and he thought it made him look smart, so he put it in his paper. Since I know what the actual word means, I know he didn't know what the word meant. So all that did was make him look bad. And you don't want to do that. In writing, size does not matter. Bigger words don't mean better words. It's more important how you construct your sentences and how you selectively pick what vocabulary you're going to use that makes you sound intelligent. How well you get your point across, how well you organize your thoughts, and how smoothly the reader can get through the paper. That's what makes you look as smart as you are, not big fancy words by any means. I think we've all done this at one point or another. When you use quotes or facts that you don't understand. So how many times have you been doing a research paper, and I'm guilty of this myself when I was in earlier grades. When you're doing a research paper and you know that it looks good to have quotes in there, so you find one and the quote has a lot of big words in it and the quote sounds really good, so you put the quote in your paragraph, but you're not really that sure what the quote says, but hey, the quote looks good, so it must be good, right? Not necessarily. The worst thing is when you do that and you pick a quote that looks good and it sounds good, but you have no idea what it means. Because sometimes you can end up contradicting your point and not even necessarily realizing it. So when you do that, all you're doing is shining this huge beacon on the fact that you did not know what that quote said. Just like when you use a word you don't know. Same thing. I'm just going to write a couple of these so this way I can talk about them all at once. And you know, the last one I'm writing is just so technical. Another way that you can end up making yourself look dumb is when you use outdated sources. So if you're talking about computers and technology, let me back up first. Let me give you an example. I have a student who is doing a paper on patient access. So how much do patients have access to their records, basically? And how does that change the patient-physician or dentist interaction? That's what that student is working on. So basically, if you have access to your records, you can update them more often. You're able to take them to other physicians easier. You have a better say in your own health care, so that it makes patients feel involved. So the odds of them actually doing what the doctor recommends them do go up. That's the idea behind that. She found a source and showed me the source, and it was from 1982. What's the problem with that? I wasn't even alive in 82. So what's the problem with that? Medically, are things the same now as they were in 1982? No. Computer medical records, which are called EMR, EHRs, they didn't exist in 1982. Computers didn't even really exist in a widespread commercial kind of a way like they do now. They didn't exist in 82. So she can't write a paper about patients accessing their records. And because now so much of it is done electronically through computers, she can't really talk about that the right way using a source that's 30-some years old or 40-some years old, depending on what year you're watching this video. So already she's making herself look bad because she's using stuff that's way too old to be right anymore. So we fixed that for her. Another way that you make yourself look dumb is by making fact errors. So there's another video where I talked about fact errors. I take 10 points off for every fact error you make because they are super important that you don't do it. So I take big points off of those things you're not supposed to do, so it acts as a deterrent. But a fact error is when you miseducate your reader. And if you've already watched the video where I talked about fact errors, sorry, but I'm about to repeat myself. The example I used in the other one was Titanic. So the Titanic sank in 1912. If you accidentally slip and you write 1921, then you've just given me, as the reader, the wrong information. So now I'm walking around thinking the Titanic sank in 1921. Maybe I go on Jeopardy, and that's the final question, and I get that wrong because of you. So every single reader has this inherent automatic trust in what they read, and that the information in it is right. So that's a big responsibility on you guys as writers. So if you mess that stuff up, you've wronged me as a reader, and you can't do that. So when you make fact errors, all you do is let people know either you weren't careful enough to go back and check your information and edit things, that you didn't do research, that you don't know anything about the topic, and as soon as a reader has any kind of doubt in you, you've just shot your credibility for the rest of the essay, and you don't want to do that to readers. And the last one is, please don't be cheesy. Really. I mean, you know what cheesy is. You know when people say something and you look at them and you're like, what? When a girl is out and the guy does the, wow, heaven just lost another angel because you fell out of heaven, or one of those stupid pickup lines. And you look at them and you're just like, really? You think that's going to work? Readers are going to make the same face at your paper when you write something that sounds cheesy or corny. And usually writers get cheesy or corny because they have no idea what their own writing style is, or they can't figure out anything else to say. So you are not allowed to do that, because you're going to be able to figure out other things to say. So when you're cheesy, it makes you look bad, because you're supposed to be a professional and you're presenting yourself as a professional. So as soon as you go cheesy, you don't look like a professional anymore. So that's how you make yourself look bad. On the flip side of things, you can also end up doing things that make your audience feel stupid. And nothing is worse than when somebody makes you feel dumb. You don't want to be there anymore. Imagine I spent entire mods talking down to you. Okay, guys, take out your pen. It's long and skinny, and it has a point at the end, and sometimes it has a cap and stuff. There'll be colors coming out of the end of it. Like, imagine if I talked to you like that all day, every class. You would want to smack me. But it would make you feel stupid, and you would get aggravated. That, what I just did about the pen, is called over-explaining. When you over-explain common... I put the X in the wrong spot. Sorry. I'm like, why does that look weird? I did it through my R instead of my X. Sorry. When you take basic concepts that everybody knows, cars, chairs, light switches, pencils, markers, erasers, stuff like that. When you take basic concepts that everybody knows, whether probably they're 5 or 80, and you explain them, then the reader's looking at the paper going, seriously? Don't you think I know this on my own? You really need to explain it to me? How stupid do you think I am? And they're already going to get this bad juju around whatever you're writing, and they're probably not going to want to keep reading. At the same token, and I'm going to contradict myself here, if you don't explain stuff that they probably don't know, and you talk about it as if they do know it, so if you assume they know concepts, or if you assume they understand the link between things, or if you assume they know that caries means cavities, or if you assume that they know what scaling means, or if you assume that they know what an iPod shuffle is, then they're going to feel dumb, because they're going to be reading it going, should I already know how to do that? Should I already know how to do this? Why don't I know this? Is it me? Should I know this, or is it them? Am I messing up, or are they messing up? You don't want your reader to have that feeling. I'm going through that right now with Windows 8. One of the classrooms has Windows 8 on it, and every time I stand in the front of the room and I have to pull up my PowerPoints, it takes me a little while to figure out how to navigate it and to find my flash drive to be able to pull the stuff up. So I finally looked at my group of students the one day and I was like, is it just me, or do I feel like, I feel like I need another degree just to be able to work Microsoft 8. And I'm like, or Windows 8. I was like, I feel really stupid, and luckily the class laughed because they didn't know how to do it either. But it made me embarrassed in front of the rest of the group. Even though I laughed it off, it was no big deal, they helped me figure it out, whatever. It still made me feel uncomfortable and stupid and embarrassed. And that's how you make your reader feel when you talk about these big terms and things like that. Did anybody ever say something to you or talk to you about something, and you looked at them and said, well, what does that mean? And they looked at you and went, you don't know what that means? Like, what is wrong with you? Or something to that effect. And you wanted to punch them in the face because you felt this big. In essence, that's what you're doing to a reader when you're using terms they might not understand. So there's a very, very, very fine line between over-explaining and under-explaining. So that might be one of the challenges that you face as you keep writing through this mod. one of those, do you think I should define it, or do you think it's okay to define? So you have to think of common everyday things that every single age and every single gender would know. Chair, car, lights, light switch, cup. Those are things 5-year-olds know, 80-year-olds know, boys and girls know. The problem you run into is when it becomes so inherent in you and it's so everyday. So computers are such an everyday part of our life. But if you're writing a paper and you're talking about a flash drive, what about the, and I hate to stereotype, but what about the 80-year-old who did not grow up in the same kind of computer-driven life that we live in, and they haven't used one? My grandmother had no idea how to work her answering machine, and it was one of those, it still had the tape in it, where you just push the button to hit play. She had no idea how to use it, so she never did. My cousin bought her a CD player, which was the dumbest thing ever, because she was trying to, literally, I swear to God, she was trying to put her albums in it, and she got upset. And albums are really big things, like from the 70s and stuff. She was getting upset that they wouldn't fit. So sometimes you have people who aren't as technologically advanced. When you're talking about computer concepts or technology, maybe 5-year-olds know it, but maybe 50-year-olds don't, or 40-year-olds don't, or maybe some of you don't. I might talk about computer concepts that I know because I use it every day, but you might not know. That was why I made the video about setting up a document in Microsoft Word in MLA style, just in case. To me, it's second nature, but to you guys, it might not be. If I assumed it was second nature and I let you go and I didn't help and show you, then I would make you feel stupid to an extent. And then I never want to do that. And you never want to do that to your readers either. So these two that I'm going to write kind of go hand in hand. And really, as writers, you guys have a heavy burden. You have to do a lot of stuff for your reader. They should be sitting back, sipping Mai Tais, enjoying what you're writing. You guys have all the heavy lifting to do. So for these two, you really do your reader a disservice when you don't explain quotes and you don't explain statistics. So when you get into the phase of researching, if you're a really, really good writer, the habit you want to get into is before you write a quote from a source, you kind of lead into it and you kind of set the reader up to understand that this quote is coming. Then you write the quote. Then after the quote, you rewrite the quote in your own words. This way, if the reader didn't understand what the quote said, they understand your words. So often, quotes are talking about like our next idea, so we're using that quote to replace our words. So we write a sentence before it that sort of has something to do with it, but not really. Then we put the quote in, then we keep trucking with our next idea. And you might really like that quote, but what if the reader has no idea what that quote is talking about? Then that fact that you loved, that you thought was so amazing, just went right over their heads. So when you set them up and let them kind of understand why you're about to use that quote, and then if you paraphrase it, so if you rewrite it, so in case they didn't understand all of the jargon or whatever in the quote, they understand what you said, and then they're like, oh, okay, I get it. And they can keep going with the paper. As soon as they have to stop anywhere in their reading and go, wait, what is that? Wait, what? What the? As soon as they do anything like that, you've lost them. The more they have to do that, the less likely they are to finish your paper. And that's your goal, is to get them to the end of your paper. If they don't do that at all, beautiful, then you have succeeded. And to be honest, when you first start writing, your reader's going to do that a lot. So if we can reduce how many times I do that when I'm reading your stuff, we're golden. You've gotten better. Goal met. Another thing that is a good technique that you want to do is you want to define something as soon as you say it. So often, beginning writers have a tendency to say a word in the middle of a sentence, let's say, finish that sentence, and then in the next sentence, define whatever that term was all the way back there. That's not a good technique to do, because as a reader, I had the question all the way back here. I don't want to keep reading to see if I can find the answer. I'm not supposed to hunt for the answer. So you want to get into the habit of defining a word or a concept as soon as you say it, not waiting to do it. The longer you wait to do it, the dumber I, as a reader, am going to feel because I don't know the term. And it's going to make you look bad because you didn't know to do it then. And that particular thing I'm talking about, that's going to take a while for you to get used to. And really the way that you're going to notice it and get better at it is when you put the word here and I put a comment bubble going, what does this mean? And you notice yourself, the definition is a sentence later. So often I have students going, well, I defined it over here. You need to answer it as soon as I have the question about it as the reader. And that's going to take a long time and a while and a whole lot of practice to perfect. So please don't feel pressured if you don't get all of this right at the beginning. I'm not expecting you to. And I'm not trying to sound pessimistic, but the truth is you're not. The very first writing assignment, you are not going to get all of this right out of the gate. And that's okay. That's why there's so many assignments. But the more that you keep in mind and apply, then the more you're able to keep in mind and apply the next time, and the next time. And I'm going to push you. And you are all going to succeed and be able to do this. There are just a lot of components involved that sometimes can give us a little bit of stress. I'm going to erase. So the overall goal is to not make anybody look bad. I don't know why these words are staying on the board when I erase. There are also ways to make both your audience feel dumb and make yourself look bad. Yeah, I just had a spelling mistake. Good for you if you caught that. And I keep using the word dumb, and nobody in this room, whether you're a writer or the reader, is dumb by any means, at all. So, since that's the case, you don't want to have any opportunity to make yourself look that way, and you don't want to have any opportunity to make somebody else feel that way. That's why we're going through this, and I keep using that term. But please don't think that I feel any of you actually are. Nobody in this room is at all. If you're in a classroom, if you are home and you're in whatever room you're in, you're still not dumb. So you don't want to make yourself look that way. You want to present the best part of yourself. So a way that you make yourself and the reader look bad is through repetition. If you repeat sentences, if you repeat concepts, then it makes you look bad because you already said it once. Why are you saying it again? And the reader's going to notice. They're going to go, wait, I already read about this. Why am I reading this again? Do they not know how to organize this paper? Like, what the heck? It can also make the audience feel dumb because they're going to be like, I already read this. Why do you have to tell me again? I'm not stupid. I remember it from 2 paragraphs ago. There is a very, 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 very big difference between emphasizing a point and repeating a point. So often as writers, we want to get our point across, big time. Well, if you say the same sentence over and over and over again, you're repeating yourself. You're not emphasizing your point. So emphasizing is when you say your point in different ways with different facts, set up differently every single time. So when you repeat things, that's a problem. Another way that you make both your audience and yourself look bad is when you do something called announcing your intentions. So a lot of the times writers, especially beginning writers, have a tendency to do the, in this paper I will talk about, in this paragraph I will now talk to you about in this paper, I have already talked to you about apples, bananas, and oranges. It makes both of you look bad. First of all, it makes you look bad because it looks like you can't figure out anything else to say. So often, I hope you're chuckling because almost everybody's guilty of this in some way or another at some point in their writing lives. Usually beginning writers do this, and in 5th grade and 6th grade and junior high, you're taught to do this stuff because it's a way in. Because a lot of the times you're stuck and you can't figure out how to start a sentence or how to start an intro or how to start a paragraph, so that's what you do. That's your way in, and then the rest flows. Well, you're all better at maturity, bill paying, whatever, at this point than you were in 6th grade. So let's let your writing be better than you were in 6th grade too. So that's how it makes you look bad. It makes your audience look dumb because your audience is going to look at that going, why do you have to tell me what you're going to do? Just do it. So think about how you're going to feel if I said, I am going to walk over to the table and get my water. I am now going to walk over to the board and turn around as I stand next to the skeleton. I am then going to walk forward and put my water back down on the table. As I back up, I'm going to uncap the marker. At some point, one of you is going to go, oh my God, just do it, shut up. Right? Your reader is doing the same exact thing. And your reader, when I was just doing that about the water and the marker and moving around, I hope you thought, does she think I'm that dumb that I can't figure out what she's doing just by watching her or reading or something? That's what your audience is thinking. Just, did they think I'm that stupid that I won't understand what they're about to do as I read it? Seriously? So you have to be really, really careful of that. You don't want to make anybody sound bad or look bad by any means. So audience is a really important concept that we're going to talk about with every paper, probably in every week. You're going to hear it in the several videos, in the professional versus unprofessional writing video. You're going to see that. We're going to be talking about it in numerous classes. It's a really good thing to keep in mind, especially when you get to clinical, when you get to the real world and you're writing patient education. You never want to make anybody feel bad. You never want to lose anybody's trust. So you always want to make sure that you're presenting your best self and that you're making your audience feel comfortable, at ease, and that they trust you. So you really want to make sure that you keep all of this audience stuff in mind.